really, attitude-ish and just really cocky, and it humbled me a lot. I made friendships with people who I probably never would have talked to. I learned a lot about myself, not just modeling, so just gonna take it all in. I might cry a few more days, but I'm gonna pull it together. It's like, I've been working hard. Overall, it's been amazing. I've gone to LA, I've been China, I've been Shanghai and Beijing. I'm not gonna give up. I will never give up. That's not the type of person I am. I'm kind of happy that, it wasn't just given to me, because now I can work for something. I'm gonna appreciate it more when I get it.
Let me tell you a little bit about what got me to this place. Growing up, I never really felt like I fit in. I always felt like I was taller, skinnier, and more awkward than anyone else that I knew. One day I saw an interview with a woman by the name of Tyra Banks, who shared that she too didn't feel like she fit in at home or at school, but now as a successful model, she feels like she found her place in the world. And I thought, well, that's it. All I have to do is become a model and all my problems will be solved. So, at the age of 13, I set out to all of the top agencies in New York City. And on that day, I was told that I was too tall, too short, too urban, too everything but what it was that they wanted in a model. I remember leaving and going home. I was devastated and desperate to be understood, so I wrote a letter to Tyra Banks explaining how I felt, the feedback that I received from the agencies, and what I needed to go on with someone to understand me. She responded sometime later, and in her response, she shared that I should appreciate the journey, both the wins and the losses, embrace your failures because they'll help you appreciate the success so much more. I still apply that advice to my life on a daily basis. I was away at school when I turned 18 and Tyra announced the Cycle 9 auditions dates for America's Next Top Model. I remember arriving to the venue and seeing blocks and blocks and blocks of the most beautiful women that I've ever seen in my life. Black, white, Latina, Asian, and everything in between. And for the first time in my life, I was able to acknowledge another woman's beauty without associating them with my flaws. And in that moment, taught me that when you're walking in your purpose, you'll feel a sense of peace because you're right where you're supposed to be. I finally got into the audition room, and they lined us up, chest to back, chest to back, chest to back. My big moment came down to Bianca Golden, 18 years old, Queens, New York, 5'11", 120 pounds. That was it. That was my moment. I was stuck in my head thinking, that can't be it. I need to tell them how I feel about not fitting in. I want to tell them that I wrote this letter to Tyra. I want to give them the advice that she gave me. I want to tell them for the first time in my life, I feel like I fit in. I was so caught in my thoughts that I almost missed them call my name. I was the only woman chosen out of all of those women wrapped around the block from New York City to make it on America's Next Top Model, Cycle 9. I always get chills when I tell that part of the story because there's so many moments in our lives where we get caught up in who's in front of us and who's behind us in line that we forget what's for us is for us. You can't take it, you can't touch it. You don't even know it's there because it's mine. Now, I went on national television as a black girl of West Indian descent from Queens, New York. I was unapologetically myself, which made for great television. But it's also the reason why I didn't win. I'm glad it's not playing for me. Now I hope I don't ruin this. I'll let it play. Now I hope I don't ruin this for anybody, but I finished third runner-up, and I was crushed. I was scared that everybody would see me as a loser. Isn't it funny that we could do all these amazing things and still get caught up on the one thing that we didn't do? I overcame my insecurities. I was one of 11 women chosen out of millions to compete. I was even one of the faces of the Olympics, and that wasn't enough. I still focused on the one thing that I failed to accomplish. I went home devastated. I cried and I was hiding from the reactions of the world. And then one day I received a call connecting me to Tyra. I just knew she was going to tell me that there was a mistake and I was really the winner. That's not exactly how it played out though. She was just calling to tell me that there was an agency, Click Model Management, that was interested in signing me. And all I had to do was show up in person. Now, as a product of my environment, I knew how not only to show up, but how to show out. So I went and got the Jamaica Avenue special, and now for those of you who are not from Queens, New York, that is a long weave, a nice set of acrylic nails, paired with some thick, long lashes. Yes. I showed up to Click Model Management ready to reclaim my time and get signed. But that's not exactly how it played out. When Jewel, who was the president of Click Model Management at the time, came out, I heard her whisper to the receptionist, "I thought you said she was here." To which I jumped up and introduced myself. "Hi, how are you?" And she stopped. She turned her head. She squinted. And then she ushered me to the back. But I didn't think nothing of it. I thought maybe this is just how bougie people say hello. When we got to her office, she explained that she was just a bit taken back because on the show I had a low haircut. To which I responded, "Yeah, but you know, yesterday I got a weave." She said, "Well, can you go in the back and take it off?" "My hair?" No, it doesn't work like that. She got up, walked over and grabbed my hands. I wiggled my nails so she could see them. She said, "Well, what about these? Can you take them off?" And I was like, "Well, not right now." Finally, she grabbed me by my chin and said, "Certainly, darling, you weren't born with these lashes." Before she could even ask, I said, "Well, listen, these can't come off." She thanked me for my time and said we'd be in touch. I packed up my portfolio and I began to feel uneasy. She asked, "Do you need anything?" I said, "No," but as I started to walk out, I turned around and I said, "Do you need my cell phone number?" She said, "No, darling, we have it on file." So I took a few more steps. I didn't want to leave. I turned around and I said, "Well, what about my email address?" Just in case. And she said, "We'll be in touch, darling." I made it all the way to the door. I had my hand on the knob. I began to turn. When I turned back around and I said to her, "You know, sometimes if I'm underground, like on a train, and my phone is acting up, you should, let me give you my mother's number because the train will always recognize you." She put her hand on my shoulder and said, "Darling, we'll be in touch." I made it all the way outside before I started crying. But I couldn't sit in that moment. I needed to do something because there was an opportunity in front of me and I couldn't lose it. So I went to the closest barbershop. I sat down and I said, "Cut it off." And as he started cutting off my hair, I started plucking off my nails. And then I got to my lashes and I ripped those off. I left the men in the barbershop that day scared and scarred. I got outside. I called Jewel and I said, "Hey, Jewel." She said, "Bianca, I told you we'll be in touch." And I said, "No. I know. I just wanted to let you know. I cut my hair off. I took those nails off. Lashes, gone." She said, "Well, why would you do that?" I was unemployed and bald. I was a failure. I had failed to get signed, so I took an alternative route. I got on the show, failed to win. I had an agency interested in signing me. All I had to do was show up. I failed to show up the right way. By all accounts in my mind, I was the failure. I was no longer afraid to fail because that would mean that I was afraid of myself. I was a big fail. Rejection was no longer a concern because at that point I heard no so much it became a part of my love language. The only fear I had left in me was that I'd lose my will to try. So at the age of 18, I set out to all the top 10 agencies in New York City. And on that day, they told me that I was too tall, too short, too urban, too everything but what it was that they were looking for in a model. I was emotionally and physically drained when I got to the last casting office. Now, every open casting call is different. At Major Model Management, Their main office consists of a long table with agents sitting on either side in front of their computers, and their casting process requires you to stand in front, introduce yourself, share your name, walk around the table, and then exit. I noticed that none of the agents looked up as the models went through the casting process, so I started looking around, and I would notice that all the hope in their eyes would leave as they would leave out. My sadness turned to anger, and by the time it was my turn, I went in and then I went out with a bang. Good morning. How's everyone doing? It doesn't even matter that it's not morning, it's afternoon, but nobody's paying attention, so who cares? My name is Bianca. You don't care about that. So I'm just going to walk with you guys. Matter of fact, I'm not going to walk, I'm going to march, because no one's paying attention. No one cares that we're out here just trying to get 5 seconds of your time to see if we're good enough. It doesn't matter. Hey, look, I know you're happy I'm done. So am I. Have a good day. God bless. True story. When I was done, I sat down and take my heels off, and as I began to tie my Jordans, I felt the tap on my shoulder. And I knew it was security there to remove me. I didn't even look up. I was just like, I don't need an escort. I'm good. And so the tap said, actually, we don't want you to leave. We'd like to sign you. I looked up. It was one of the agents, and I just started to cry. And then I started to laugh at myself. And finally, I have become a model. My childhood dream was a reality. I did things that I only dreamt about. From the outside looking in, I had made it. But I wasn't happy. I missed so much of life because I was never home. Birthdays, holidays, graduations, anniversaries, the things we take for granted. People stopped inviting me places because they knew I wasn't going to make it. And one day I called my agent and I quit. I couldn't do it anymore. I was 24, maybe 25, retired, unemployed, and lost. So I did what all black people do when they need guidance. I went to church. I needed God to speak to me, but he was silent. I couldn't sit around and not do anything. I'm a doer, so I began to do. I started a ministry for girls for girls ages 13 to 18, called She Can, which stood for Sisterhood Empowerment Can Change a Nation. I loved every moment of it. I planned throughout the day. I couldn't wait for them to get out of school so we could meet and have discussions, share knowledge, build relationships. When I was with them, I felt the same sense of peace that I had when I was auditioning for Top Model. And though I was still unemployed, I was fulfilled, I was happy, and my heart was full. I wanted to bottle up this feeling and keep it forever. When I took care of myself, I merely existed. But when I contributed to the existence and well-being of someone else, I felt alive. My trail of failures led me to a calling in education, so I thought, that's it. All I have to do is become a teacher, and all my problems are going to be solved. I realized that during that time of my life, if I didn't fail so many times, I wouldn't have found my calling. Because it wasn't the failure, it was my ability to keep trying despite the fear of failure. I know so many people who wouldn't get back on the bike because someone saw them fall and they were afraid of getting laughed at. I know just as many people who had plans and prematurely shared it with someone, but it didn't go as planned, so they stopped trying because they were afraid of getting judged. I know some of the most talented people who blame laziness, but really they're afraid of trying because there's a chance that people may see their weaknesses. I know brilliant minds who are afraid of hearing the word no, so they don't try at all. The reality is that there isn't a person in here who hasn't failed at one thing or another. But the moments that we consider failures were all purposeful, and possibly why you're sitting here today. It's certainly why I'm sitting here. This past May, I completed my fellow year at Kip Ant Middle School. I couldn't imagine being anything else. Teaching is a very selfish act of service for me. I gained so much from my kids and found myself being a student as they taught me about life. One lesson that stands out was their fear of failure. I constantly tell them to stop being afraid to be great. I couldn't understand how a group of students could be so bright, filled with so much talent, and yet so afraid to show off their greatness. It didn't occur to me until much later that they weren't afraid to be great. They were afraid to fail. I found myself constantly telling them my favorite failure anecdote that takes me back to my third grade teacher, sharing the reasons pencils have erasers so that when we make mistakes, we can remove them and move on. What I didn't tell them was that for so long, I secretly hated that theory because we all know that even the best erasers don't remove the mistakes completely. You can still see remnants of where you tried something that didn't work. But as an adult, I can appreciate the idea of spots being left behind as a reminder of effort. If we empower our students to become human erasers, then they will understand that our failures lead us to our first draft. Remind them that when you're writing the story of your life, mistakes are essential in success because without them, how can you understand who you are or where you're going without examining where you came from? Incorporating phrases like, that's okay, it's not a big deal, and let me tell you how long it took me to do that thing that you're currently struggling with. It makes kids feel comfortable to try because we've taken the power away from failing. They'll start to consider failure just a mistake that they can bounce back from. I reflect on the various PDs that focus on the way in which children learn best. From my experience as both a student and a teacher of life, it's clear that children mimic more of what you do than what you instruct them to do. Now, if that be true, then in order to get children to embrace failure, you don't have to lecture them about considering failure the end but the beginning, because we'll be constant reminders of what it looks like when you do. There's purpose in failure. Imagine living in a world where everyone walks in their purpose and believes in themselves because they're confident in their contributions. We have the power to make that a reality, starting with the students in our classrooms, embracing their failures as a reminder of effort and a journey to success. Our kids are bombarded with images of what perfection looks like every day, from social media influencers who Photoshop and overfilter their photos to entertainers who appear to have just made it overnight. We have to add failure to the curriculum. If we don't talk about failure, it becomes a thing that everyone's afraid of. But if we share our stories in defeat and success, we humanize what failure and mistakes look like in our everyday lives. We cannot commit to excellence without first committing to embrace failure. What if I told you that our kids are afraid to fail because they've been groomed to not want to be the loser, the disappointment, or the person who lets down their hardworking parent? So as a result, they merely exist. They don't try. As a matter of fact, they do just enough to walk by and be amongst the crowd. What are you doing to combat that thinking? When I was growing up, the only time people talked about failure is when they said they didn't want to be one. Which is why we cannot commit to excellence without first committing to embrace failure. The journey's not supposed to be easy. There's a lot of highs and lows, but we have to create a culture where failure is accepted and effort is celebrated. If I had given up when I failed to get an agency to sign me, then I wouldn't be able to walk in my purpose today. If I stopped trying after I failed to win America's Next Top Model, I wouldn't be able to walk in my purpose today. If I stopped trying after people told me that I was too tall, too short, too everything but what it was, I wouldn't be able to walk in my purpose today. I wouldn't be able to walk in my purpose today. I've dedicated so much of my life to embracing failure. These days, I'm just focusing on committing to excellence one cohort at a time.